Hi everyone, my name is Joanna Serafin, and for my Philosophy 15 project, I decided to visit the Shilai Buddhist temple in Hacienda Heights. I went by myself on October 2nd, 2022. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to book any of the in-person services or an official tour just because a lot of these things are still closed due to COVID, but I didn't let that stop me from exploring. I immediately noticed how beautiful the architecture was, and it honestly made me even more excited to go inside, but you aren't allowed to film inside of the actual temple. As I was walking from one end of the temple to another, one of the guides actually waved me down, and I walked to her and she offered to have me subscribe to their email list. And I'm honestly so glad that I followed her because I ended up following her to this table where another man was sitting as well. Since I was there with them, I just wanted to confirm that all of the tours were canceled. I didn't want to miss anything while I was there. And I'm so glad that I asked because when I did, the man that was sitting down, who I later found out his name was Chris, offered to take me on a tour. So again, so glad that I asked because I wouldn't have had this experience otherwise. And honestly, this is when I really learned the most during my time at the temple. So we started from the top and he took me back to the front of the temple and he first explained to me the Four Noble Truths, which are number 1, life is suffering. Number 2, suffering is caused by desire. Number 3, there is a way out of suffering. And number 4, that way is the Eightfold Path. I cannot believe I just did that off the top of my head. Here is the symbol of the Eightfold Path, which we also learned about in class. Chris then took the time to explain to me the meaning behind the lotus flowers that were all throughout the temple. And these are his words, not mine. He said, "A lotus flower grows from muck. Despite there being muck all around it and all underneath it, it still grows and flourishes into a beautiful flower. And that's you. You are a lotus flower." I thought that was so beautiful, and honestly, it's something I will never forget. Chris then took me inside the Bodhisattva Hall. He said that they were enlightened sages, and they're comparable to like a saint in the Catholic religion, and people go to them to pray, but they aren't necessarily asking for something as you would normally see in Christianity or Catholicism. Personally, that's what I grew up knowing and being familiar with. He said that instead of asking them for things, they instead say thank you for the things that they already possess. And this doesn't mean material things by any means. It's more so things like compassion. I don't remember the name of the statue to the right of Buddha, but I'll never forget what Chris said. He said, "Do you see the way that they are pouring out the water? This is how you should feel compassion. It should naturally just flow." And there was one to the right of that statue, and this one represented wisdom. And he said that these two go hand in hand. And the reason why is because although you do want to give compassion to people, you also have to be wise enough to know when to stop giving compassion, because not everyone, of course, deserves an endless amount of your compassion, and that's something that you learn through wisdom. He then brought me to a map of the overall temple, and he told me that the temple was actually structured to look like the leaf of a Bodhi tree, which is the tree that Buddha was meditating under when he reached enlightenment. I thought that was such a cool detail. I've never seen anything like that before, to have like the entire architecture of a building actually represent a meaningful symbol. I thought that was amazing. He then took me around and told me some facts about some of the statues that were all around. Like this one here has a shoulder covered and another one uncovered, and this is to represent the different climates that they encountered. And this one here is showing the meditation sign for the lotus flower, which I did notice that a lot of them were actually doing. And throughout the tour, I noticed that a lot of the statues had money on them. And I asked Chris about this, and he said that these are actually offerings that people leave for them. And I thought this was interesting because this is something that I have also seen in Catholicism growing up. This is an exhibition containing a female bodhisattva by the name of Avalokitesvara. One of the things Chris said he loves and appreciates the most about Buddhism is that they see women as equally powerful as men, and he explained that when you alienate half of the population, you cut your opportunities to learn in half. And I have to say that I really agree with this sentiment. As we made it to the other side, he explained to me that the more animals there are on a building, the more significant the building is. Here we see some of the first followers of Buddha, which can be compared to, let's say, the disciples of Christianity. We then made it to my absolute favorite part of the tour. Seriously, so thankful for Chris, because if it wasn't for him, I would have missed this exhibit entirely. It honestly looked closed when I first walked by it, so again, so thankful. I wasn't actually allowed to film in there, but I think Chris saw how mesmerized I was by some of this art, and he pretended he wasn't looking for a few of the shots that I got. And this first one here is a painting on cloth, and I had to zoom in on the details of this because I could not believe that somebody hand painted this. It was just absolutely breathtaking, something I will literally never forget. This next one, though, these tiny little art pieces are seriously some of the most amazing art that I've ever seen in my entire life. I would love to own one of these someday. These are little bottles that Chris said they used to store opium in. And the most fascinating part about these little bottles is that they are painted with a little curved brush on the inside, and they have to be painted backwards. So when you're looking at me here, if you were painting me, you would paint, my body first, and then you would paint my clothes. You would add details like the hair and everything else, which literally means you would have to paint all of the details first, and then the clothes, and then afterwards you would paint my body, because you're doing it in the layers that you're going to be seeing through the bottle, if that makes sense. And I could not believe my eyes. The fact that somebody was even able to create this is just something I will never get over. And Chris actually shared that he thinks that the people that created these were actually on opium, which I thought was really funny. Finally, Chris took me to the outside of the main shrine, where people were giving offerings on the outside rather than the inside where they normally would. This was also due to COVID. And I asked Chris for a picture, and he was kind enough to say yes. He actually shared with me that the people that work there or, serve as guides, they are actually all volunteers, which I found to be very noble of them. And here is Chris walking away. Thank you for everything, Chris. And that was the end of my day at the Shilai Buddhist Temple. I am so thankful for this experience, and I honestly can't wait to go back.